Have you ever wandered into the wilderness and felt eyes watching from the shadows? I'm glad you're here, brave enough to dive into these chilling tales. Thank you for joining me today. Your courage and curiosity make sharing these stories worthwhile. Our first story takes us deep into Montana's eerie Swan Range, to the chilling encounter of Malcolm Three Feathers, a former park ranger who once believed myths were mere bedtime stories. Holland Lake and the Mouthless Man. My name is Malcolm Three Feathers. I'm 45 years old and spent 18 years as a ranger around the Swan Range in northwest Montana. As a Salish man, I grew up with ancestral legends, what white folks call scary bedtime stories. But I know, not all of them are just myths. This happened in 2015 when I was still on duty. I remember it clearly because it was the first summer after a major wildfire, and the last time I ever entered Holland Lake without fear. My friend Eli Redtree, a carpenter living on the Flathead Reservation, drove back into town in the middle of the night, shaking, unable to form a sentence. I was the one who helped him out of the driver's seat. His shirt was stained with dry blood, eyes vacant. He only muttered, "It took Trent." No sound, no trail, no eyes, just skin and sound. I joined the search party heading back to the campsite by the lake. I didn't tell anyone, but I heard it too, right where Eli said. A voice whispering, like through a torn throat. On the tree line, we found strange drag marks, not scratches, but like something had melted its way down. The leaves nearby were dry as paper, while everything else was still damp with morning dew. And then, the smell, a sickly sweet odor, like moldy honey. It reminded me of what my grandfather used to say, the one that lives in the woods but never moves when people are watching. The search lasted 7 days. No Trent, no body, no shoes, no footprints. Eli disappeared from society afterward, lived quietly. But 10 years later, I saw his old truck parked near the lake. One tire still sunk in mud, keys in the ignition, and the driver's seat was wet, like someone had just left it. I returned alone. I didn't tell anyone. I saw it. Standing at the forest's edge, back turned to me. A tall, thin creature covered in something that looked like unwashed animal skin. No face, no mouth, no eyes. Just a smooth stretch of white flesh where a face should be, like a mask sewn onto bone. I don't know if it heard me, but it stopped when I stepped back. And then, from that blank face, a sound came. Not a voice, but it called my name, in Eli's voice. "My Colum." I turned and ran. I never told the police, but now Eli is gone, just like Trent. And the camera found at their camp. The last photo showed a reflection on the lake, a faceless figure standing behind the two men. I don't know what it is, but I believe it's not just a creature. It's memory, it's sound, it's fear etched into the woods. If you ever hear your name echo through the forest, even if you're alone, don't turn around. If you've ever felt an unexplainable presence or heard a whisper calling your name from the darkness, you're not alone. Let me know your experiences in the comments. Your stories matter. Now, let's travel south to Arizona's scorching Tonto National Forest, where firefighter Jesse Tallbear faced something much more terrifying than wildfire. The call and the smoke. I've fought fire my whole life. Fires of nature, of hatred, of fear. But I'd never faced anything like that. Fire, at least, makes a sound when it comes. That thing didn't. My name is Jesse Tallbear. In 2011, I was 36, serving as deputy leader in a wildfire crew at Tonto National Forest in central Arizona, where summer brings drought, lightning, and smoke pillars taller than skyscrapers. I'm Apache. My blood is tied to earth and fire, so I trust what I see, smell, and feel in the wind. This happened during a major July fire called Cedar 23. Our crew was sent to Hell's Ridge, a rugged area with poor radio signals, and worse, it was a gray zone on the map. No one in our team had ever set foot there. I went with Bo Ramirez and Dylan Watts, two close teammates. We were assigned to set up a forward base on a clearing near a ravine. We carried gear, pitched tents, checked wind, and prepared for a long night. The fire was closing in. Bo was quiet, solid. Dylan was younger, playful, but always sensitive to odd things. Right after we set up camp, Dylan said something that gave me chills. "This place doesn't sound like other forests. The trees here don't make noise." That night, the wind shifted. Smoke thickened. We heard calls for help coming from the western woods, where no crew was stationed. Bo, Dylan, and I split up. I went with Dylan. The voice repeated, not urgent, not panicked, just slow, steady, like echoing from a cave. "Help! Me! I'm here!" We followed the voice. The deeper we went, the thinner the smoke became. The wind died. Dylan suddenly stopped. "Jesse, the trees up ahead. Why are they twisted?" I looked. A whole patch of forest, dead trees twisted like candy canes, blackened bark. But no fire had touched this place. And then we saw a man in a firefighter uniform, standing about 60 feet away, back turned to us. I shouted, "Hey, you okay? Are you fire crew?" He didn't respond, just stood there, head tilted back unnaturally, almost 180 degrees, like a puppet with no strings. Dylan whispered, "Jesse, his face. He has no eyes." I pulled Dylan back, gripping my flashlight and axe. The man turned, his face pale, no eyes, no nose, just a wide open mouth, screaming silently. From his neck, black smoke poured upward, writhing like snakes against the wind. Then I noticed the name tag on his chest. J. Tallbear. Shit, that's my name. We ran, didn't look back, didn't stop. When we got back to camp, Bo was at the radio, sweating bullets. "I thought you two vanished. I heard Jesse calling me from the woods too." Next morning, wind shifted again. The fire neared. We were ordered to evacuate Hell's Ridge. Before leaving, I looked back one last time and saw barefoot tracks leading from the ravine to our camp. Not mine, not Bo's, not Dylan's. I never reported this, but since then, I stopped believing wildfires were the worst things in the woods. I think something lives in the smoke. It doesn't burn, it remembers, and it mimics, and it calls your name in your own voice. If you've ever worked in the forest, if you've ever heard your name from the smoke, don't answer. Some cries for help aren't meant to be answered, they're bait. Have you ever heard your own voice coming from the dark? Leave a comment, share your story, if you dare. Thank you for staying with me through these haunting narratives. It's important to remember that sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. If these stories resonate with you or bring back unsettling memories, please don't hesitate to share. Our next chilling encounter brings us to Idaho's rugged Sawtooth Mountains, revealing secrets that should have remained unspoken, told by May Morningstar. Things that must not be named. There were things my husband saw in the forest that he never put into words, but I knew. I saw it in the way he looked over his shoulder when stepping into the house, and the way he froze when he heard children laughing at night. My name is May Morningstar. I live in a small town called Stanley, nestled in the Sawtooth Mountains in northern Idaho. In 2002, my husband, Caleb Morningstar, 43, was a seasoned ranger, having worked the forest here for nearly 2 decades. He was Shoshone. He loved the woods like they were his own blood. And that year, Caleb came home with a look I'll never forget. A boy, Jeremy Lowell, 9 years old, went missing while camping with his parents near a creek in the woods. Caleb was put in charge of the search in that area because he was the only one on the team who knew the old path leading up Timber Hollow, a place so dense GPS barely worked. 3 days in a row, he didn't come home, just checked in on the radio for a few minutes each night, saying they found nothing but a long slide mark in the dirt and a red jacket covered in sap. I asked, "Are you okay?" Caleb said, "Not all creatures leave tracks." On the 4th night, he returned, silent, smelling of cold smoke and sweat. I did the laundry and found a torn scrap of paper in his pocket, written in shaky pencil. It sounds like wind, but its eyes see me. I confronted him. That was the first time Caleb told me. During a separated search sweep, he and another ranger, Jonas Kane, went deeper into a rock crevice no one had thought to check before. Climbing over a fallen log, they caught a glimpse of something tall sliding just outside their vision. No footsteps, no rustling, just a shift in the wind and absolute silence. Caleb shone his flashlight, and he said, "I wish I hadn't seen it." A creature, nearly 10 feet tall, its limbs long and bent the wrong way. Its skin was gray-white, like cold ash, but no face, just 2 deep holes, not eyes, but voids that stared back. Jonas reached for his gun, but didn't shoot. They backed away. Then something dropped at their feet, the boy's tiny backpack with snacks still inside, and his pocket knife. The creature didn't attack. It just jerked forward in stiff, unnatural steps, like pulled by invisible thread. And then, it vanished into the trees like it was never there. The search ended a few days later. No Jeremy, no blood, No crying. Nothing. Except the backpack. But Caleb never really came back to himself. He started sleeping with the lights on. He locked every window, even in the heat of summer. I once heard him mumble in his sleep, "Don't look back, Jonas. Don't turn around. It's still watching." And he was right. Jonas Kane disappeared just 3 months later during a solo trek. Caleb never named the creature, but I knew. I went digging through old stories, and the elders in our tribe called it the Forest's Wrath. A spirit, not evil, not kind, just older than people, and it hated to be disturbed. It didn't kill. It made you forget the way home, forget who you were. My husband died of heart failure in 2019, but I believe a part of him got lost in those woods back in 2002. Your bravery for making it this far is commendable. Remember, if the wilderness ever calls your name, think twice before answering. Next, we moved to Lolo National Forest in Montana, where Ranger Noah Greystone discovered that some horrors dwell beneath familiar trails, the teeth of darkness. The forest was where I went to heal, but that night it was hunting. My name is Noah Greystone, a ranger in Lolo National Forest, Montana. I was 41 that year. After 2 decades living among trees and wind, I thought I understood the forest. I was wrong. It happened in September of 1994, before the leaves had fully lancen, but when the chill had already arrived. I was assigned to search for 2 missing hikers near Cotton Ridge, a place tied to old buried stories, the silent forest where trails were closed but people still wandered in. That day, I was accompanied by Scout, my Malinois, loyal partner, trained from pup. Scout had never reacted badly in the woods, but this time, he growled. Not a bear warning. A low, throat-tight snarl, eyes locked on a patch of empty woods. 3 hours into the search, Scout darted off the trail into thick brush, barking wildly. I followed and found a small stone shrine, nearly swallowed by moss, sunk between roots twisted like bones. I'd never seen it before. Not on any map, not in any records. On the stone surface was a symbol, a figure with a deer's head and sharp teeth pointing down. Scout pawed at the ground, then whimpered and backed away. I knelt and found fresh adult boot prints circling the shrine, then vanishing. As night fell, Scout and I camped nearby on high alert. The wind carried a strange scent, wet, metallic, bitter on the tongue. Close to midnight, Scout howled and bolted north into uncharted territory. I chased him and found a man hunched beneath a tree, trembling, clutching his stomach. He wore a worn park ranger jacket, one of the missing hikers. I asked if he was okay. He looked up. His eyes were clouded like stagnant water. His mouth curled into an unnaturally wide smile, a smile I haven't forgotten in all these years. He whispered in a voice that wasn't his, "Not me, but it's coming back, through me." I stepped back, reaching for my radio, but he shot upright, as if yanked by invisible wire. His limbs twisted, fingers elongating, bones cracked. He was changing. Scout lunged, biting his leg, but was tossed aside like straw. I screamed, drew my knife, and stabbed his side, where a human heart should be. He screeched, but didn't bleed. Instead, black smoke poured from the wound, reeking of burnt hair and raw meat. He collapsed, then started to disintegrate. Skin shriveled, teeth fell out, eyes turned to sludge. I carried Scout back to the station, arm torn, covered in blood, but it wasn't human blood, and no one believed me. They said I was panicked, delusional, claimed the man died of hypothermia, and what I saw was stress response. But I kept one thing, a black tooth I picked up near the shrine. Not human, not animal. Twisted, long, and under light, its shadow didn't match any shape I know. Scout lived 3 more years, but after that night, he never entered the woods again. He just lay at the door, staring toward the mountains, and growling, every night. Have you ever stumbled upon something in nature that didn't feel right? Let me know down below. I appreciate every experience you share. The following tale warns us that sometimes, curiosity truly does come at a price, as Logan Pike tragically learned. The Box of the Nameless. Not everything buried should be dug up, and not everyone who disappears is truly gone. My name is Logan Pike. In 2001, I was 27. Back then, I was just a young guy who thought beer, friends, and the wilderness were all I needed to forget the world. Our group had 10 people, college buddies. Every year we'd reunite for a remote camping trip. to drink and reconnect. That year, we picked Flathead Lake in northern Montana. Not the touristy part, the hidden corner only locals knew how to reach. Google Maps barely showed it, and we arrived late afternoon, set up camp near the edge of the woods. Fresh air, cold water, no one around but us. Then Braden, my closest friend, found something odd while digging for dry wood. An old dented metal box, shallowly buried under a tree root, like someone tried to hide it, and failed. We joked it was Civil War treasure. Braden opened it. Inside were a stack of black and white photos, blurry, faceless. Everyone either turned away or had their faces erased. A leather-bound journal filled with scribbles like Latin mixed with ancient Cherokee. A reddish-brown stone engraved with a symbol, a human-like face with two short horns and deep-set eyes. Braden wanted to keep it as a crazy souvenir. I said no. Something about that box made me cold inside. Not because it was old, but because it felt hot, like it had just been placed there. That first night, the campfire went out 3 times, even though there was no wind. We laughed, blamed damp wood, but after midnight, Anders, the tallest in our group, woke up saying he heard someone calling his name. We turned on flashlights. No one was there, but the whispering continued, distant yet clear. Anders, come back here. By morning, Anders was gone. No footprints, no sleeping bag, no drag marks, just his boots, neatly placed between 2 pine trees, and carved into the ground above them was the same symbol from the stone in the box. The second night, we tied our tents closer together. Braden still had the box, joking it was an immersive horror game. But I knew something had changed. His eyes were sunken. His hands trembled after sunset. Before dawn, 2 more vanished, Kennedy and Jamie, the couple. Nothing left but a torn notebook page lying in the middle of their tent, written in red ink. The food will be silent, the dark will not. We were down to 7. Braden began muttering from the journal, reciting lines like prayers no one had ever taught. Eric tried to snatch it from him. That's when a scream rose from the forest, a dry, guttural wail like something with no throat trying to cry. I said we had to leave, but it was too late. The third night, it came, tall as a lamppost, thin as a skeleton, limbs long, joints bent backward, skin pale greenish, slick like wet stone, and its face was empty. Just 2 black holes, as if someone had scooped into its skull. I fired a flare gun at it. It didn't burn, didn't scream. It only tilted its head, as if studying us. By morning, it was just me and Braden. I demanded we burn the box. He laughed, a laugh that didn't sound like his. I didn't wait. I lit the fire, tossed the box into the flames, and hurled it off the cliff west of camp, where rocks were littered with animal bones. Then I ran. Didn't look back. Didn't wait. I survived, alone. The cops, press, everyone asked. I told the truth. They laughed, called me paranoid, labeled it a group accident. I left Montana, never went back to the woods. 9 years later, the metal box appeared on my doorstep, in another state, over 600 miles away, intact. Same photos, Jatan journal, same red stone, but this time the newest photo had one more person. Someone with black hair wearing my jacket. I fled. Again. Then one day, on local news in a small town near Flathead Lake, a man was found wandering, speaking an unknown language, no ID, no name. A strange burned symbol was found on his neck, as if branded by hot metal. I recognized the eyes, gaunt, hair longer, but it was Braden, and he was smiling. If you ever go camping, if you find a rusted metal box in the middle of nowhere, don't open it, don't touch it, don't laugh. Some things can't be burned, can't be buried, and once you open it, it has already chosen you. Stories like these remind us why it's vital to respect nature's boundaries. Thank you for journeying through these mysteries with me. Let's shift perspectives now to Sam Whitlow, whose silence echoed louder than screams in the forests of Oregon. I saw everything, but I stayed silent. I didn't kill anyone, but I stayed silent when the whole town believed a man was a murderer. And now, I hear that thing's voice every time the night falls. My name is Sam Whitlow. The year was 1998. I was 48 years old, living alone in a cabin near the edge of the Wallowa Forest in eastern Oregon. The kind of man no one remembers the name of, no one notices, and I liked it that way. I used to be a ranger, but after seeing something I should never have seen, deep in the woods over a decade ago, I withdrew from the world, went off grid. No questions, no stories, until that October night when I saw everything and did nothing. I had a campsite set up on a high bluff, about 200 yards above a clearing used by locals for hunting or late night hangouts. I liked the spot. No one ever came near it, and from there I could see the entire clearing. That night was crisp, dry, and unnaturally quiet. I was halfway through a bland meal when I spotted two men setting up a tent below. One was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an orange cap. The other was thinner, gray-haired, holding a beer can. I didn't recognize them at first, but when the smaller one turned his face to the firelight, I knew it was Elias Moreno, the mechanic from Joseph. Elias had once fixed my truck, quick and solid work, quiet guy, heard his wife had left. He liked the woods, often camped solo. I was about to close my eyes when the fire below went out. No wind, no rain, just gone, like something had snuffed it. I grabbed my binoculars. Both men stood up, staring into the tree line. One, probably Hank, drew his gun, swung his flashlight. The beam landed on something standing between two trees. Not quite human, but not fully animal either. Tall, lanky, arms nearly dragging, and its eyes didn't reflect the light. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to shout, fire a warning shot, anything, but I froze. When the thing backed into the forest, Hank looked ghost pale, but refused to leave. The next night, I stayed awake. My heart hadn't rested, and I saw it again, this time crawling on all fours like a massive spider. No sound. It crept into camp. Elias was asleep inside the tent. Hank, dozing by the fire. Then the thing pounced. 10 seconds. That's all it took. I didn't see blood, no claws, but I watched it wrap around Hank like a child grabbing a stuffed toy. Then it slithered backward into the trees, its gaze never leaving mine. It knew I was there. Next morning, the whole region buzzed. Elias was detained, accused of murdering his friend. They never found Hank's body, but they found blood, a knife, and only Elias's footprints. I said nothing. I was afraid, because if I came forward, if I told them what I saw, they'd ask, "Why didn't you help?" I couldn't take that look. I've seen that look destroy people. Elias was released, but everyone treated him like a killer spinning tales about monsters. His shop closed. He sold everything, left town. No one knows where he went. Only I do. And only I know he told the truth. Years later, I got a package with no return address. Inside was an old Polaroid photo, me, on the bluff, holding binoculars, watching the clearing. A handwritten note below it. You saw me, and it saw us both. I didn't kill anyone, but I stayed silent. And now, I hear it every time wind rattles the tin roof of this old cabin. Maybe Elias forgot, but I didn't. Some memories don't need closed eyes to resurface, and some whispers no one else can hear except the one who stayed quiet when they should have spoken. Every story you hear tonight is a reminder. Sometimes witnessing can be a burden itself. Have you ever felt that weight? Your insights matter greatly to me. Next, in Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains, Jesse Two Elks discovered that ancient marks can't be erased so easily. The mark that won't fade. Some things don't die, they just sleep in blood, and sometimes they wake up through those they left behind. My name is Jesse Two Elks. In 1995, I was 42, a ranger in the Bighorn Mountains of northern Wyoming. I'm Crow. I've lived my life in these forests, what my father called the spine of the wind spirit. And it's here that I lost a friend, and the last piece of peace in my soul. I knew something was wrong when Kip Blackwell's tower went silent for 3 days. Kip was my friend, a fellow ranger, punctual, precise, always checked in. I drove 2 hours into the deep woods to reach his station, a rundown lookout post near Shell Canyon. No answer to my calls. The door was open, lights still on, coffee, cold. On the table, a half-filled journal. The last entry, "It came again last night, but I'm not afraid anymore." Behind the station, snow still covered the ground, and in that snow, long, thin footprints, uneven, clawed. They led me to a shattered pine tree, and there, I found a body, but not Kip's. Another man. His face stretched, jaw dislocated as if stuck in an endless scream, chest sunken, hollowed out. I couldn't breathe. And then I saw it. 20 yards away between the trees, a creature, tall as a stag, but thinner than anything living, ribs sharp beneath pale, frost-burned skin, and its eyes empty, like bottomless still water. It didn't walk, it glided. I fired my gun. No blood, no collapse, no disappearance, just a turn of its head. It looked at me. I lived, but something inside me didn't. I went back and called in 3 people: Ray Hollowtree, veteran hunter, Shoshone; Dr. Lena Fox, doctor and blood ritualist; Mia Sunshadow, healer, part Blackfeet, part Apache. They believed me, didn't ask questions. They came. That night, we returned to the scene. Lena marked a fire ring with deer blood. Ray stacked stone barriers. Mia buried a black stone to bait spiritual energy. I carried my father's knife, buffalo bone handle, silver blade. When night fell, the fire flickered. I knew it was coming. The wind changed. Cold rose from the dirt, and then it emerged, crawling from its own shadow. It screamed. Its throat curled like black storm clouds. Ray fired. The fire died, then roared back. Mia chanted, her voice twisted into sobs. Then it charged at her. I slashed its chest, didn't touch flesh, but struck its soul. It disintegrated like soaked ash, smoke rising into the stars. Silence. Mia collapsed, unconscious. She woke the next day, eyes fine, but on her back, a scar, twisted, branded by flame, an inverted eye. She remembered nothing, but since then, she dreams of the forest calling her name. 2 years later, I left the Ranger Corps, but the fear never left me. 10 years later, my granddaughter Callie, 8 years old, started drawing strange shapes on her bedroom wall. She'd never been to the forest, but the drawings, they matched the creature's symbol exactly. Callie now talks in her sleep. "Grandpa Jesse, do you see it? It's still here." I held my father's knife, but my hands trembled. I realized we didn't kill it. We just changed its form. It had chosen Mia. Now, it's choosing Callie. If you think a ritual ends it, you're wrong. Some things don't fear fire, don't fear bullets, don't fear sacred words. They only need one thing: someone to open the gate, and blood to carry them through. Remember its name, not to speak it, but to know when not to breathe. When night turns to stone, you're doing great. I truly appreciate your company through these unnerving tales. Remember, there's strength in sharing, and sometimes it's the only way to lessen the fear. Finally, we arrive at a strange encounter in Wind River, Wyoming, a reminder that some doors should never be opened. The 9th threshold. Some journeys aren't meant to return, and some guests never leave alone. My name is Mathis. I was one of 8 people who went missing in Wind River, Wyoming in 2011. If you've heard of it, the hikers who vanished during a guided trek in the wilderness, then you've only heard part of the truth. The rest, no one's ready for. There were 8 of us, from different countries, all part of a 5-day guided trek run by a native guide. Everything was perfect: blue skies, light wind, pristine old-growth forest, until night 3. That night, the wind stopped. The animals went quiet, and we heard singing. At first, I thought someone in our group was messing around, but everyone else froze. The singing wasn't from any of us. It echoed across the woods like the trees were breathing it. Leo, the guide, went to investigate. He never came back. We followed the sound. We didn't know why. It felt like something inside our bones was pulling us forward. Every fear inside us just went silent. We reached a clearing where a strange tree stood, tall, black, hollow, like a mouth gaping open. I don't remember who started singing first, but then we all did. A melody none of us had learned. No lyrics, no explanation. But we knew it. We circled the tree. One person stepped forward, placed their hand on the bark, and vanished. No door, no scream, no light, just gone. Into the tree. The rest is blank. I woke up in a medical station in 2023. With me were Riku and Lucia. We hadn't aged. We remembered nothing, but we all had the same scar behind our necks, spiraled like 2 doors overlapping. We didn't feel hungry, didn't feel tired, but there was something else, a presence in our minds, a memory sealed in a language older than memory. Worse still, we weren't the first to return. Claire Darnay, another trekker, had supposedly died in a car crash in Canada in 2017. But the FBI confirmed the skull from that crash was biologically identical to Claire, as she was before she disappeared. She'd come back, quietly, and then there was the footage. A documentary team found it, an old Sony camcorder deep in the forest. The video was less than 2 minutes, but it shut down an entire research wing. Nighttime, 8 people circling the hollow tree, singing in that same eerie tongue. One person steps forward, touches the bark, vanishes. The video has never been released, but I know the tree is still there. And the song, it still echoes on crescent moon nights. I don't want to go back, but something won't let me die. Claire returned first. We're following, and soon, someone else will be next. If you hear singing in the woods, don't listen. If someone comes back after years gone, don't believe they're still themselves. That door doesn't open with hands. It opens with blood and memory and our need to know what should stay hidden. Thank you for joining me on this haunting journey through the unknown. Stay safe out there, and remember, some mysteries are best left undiscovered. Good night, and until next time, trust your instincts and take care.